The spookiest thing that ever happened to me actually happened just a month or so ago. Be 27. About to immigrate from the US to Europe. Going backpacking one last time with work friend. Decide to do 40 miles in West Virginia, Cranberry Wilderness. Drive from West Ohio to there after work on Friday. Get there around 2100. The road is suspiciously gated off about 5 miles from the trailhead. Whatever, let's hoof it. Let me interject here that Cranberry Wilderness is one of the creepiest places I had ever backpacked before this, so I was already a little spooked. I had never done the northern section before though, so this was new to me. We start hiking in, both very paranoid and creeped out. Walk around a bend in the road and see pick related from a distance. I had just watched I Am Legend, so alarms were instantly going off. Pull out my handgun and approach it cautiously. Not a booby trap, just a huge fucking hole in the road that someone had planted a stick in. Keep hiking, so lots of shotgun holes in signs, common in West Virginia. At one point, a car comes up the road at us and we fly into the woods along the side. Jeep slows down next to where we were hiding. We're both totally confused at how it even got there since the road was blocked off. It slows down to an idle right next to us, then drives off after maybe 30 seconds. Wait a minute before getting back on the road. Keep hiking up the road, see that it has fallen to shit and been washed out in several places. We now know why it was gated off. Keep hiking until we reach the trailhead. We still had 5 miles to do tonight and it was already 22:30. At the trailhead is a campground of sorts. 5 sites that are maintained by the Forest Service. One of these sites has a fire blazing in it. No people though. I have my buddy watch my bag while I do circles around the site, looking for tracks. I only see some shoe prints around the fire pit, nowhere else. I've been tracking for almost 20 years now, so I know what I'm doing. Really strange since there were no vehicles, no way for vehicles to get there with all the gates, and no other tracks coming from back up the trail. Decide to leave it be, but it really was one of the creepiest things I've seen in the woods, not sure why, really. Hike about 2.5 more miles before calling it quits at a river fork. Pitch our hammocks and anchor our tarps to each other for support since there was a massive storm expected for the whole weekend. Eat dinner and in bed by 0:30. Less than 2 hours later, the storm hits pretty hard. Wakes me up and I lay there just listening to the soothing sounds. I absolutely love thunderstorms. Maybe a half hour later, I hear branches breaking over the sound of the rain. I go about half alert mode, but grab my handgun just in case. Silent for a bit after that. Right after I put it away again, I hear a large crash as if a nearby tree was broken in two. Full alert. I know it was probably caused by the storm or something, but get out and check regardless. Standing naked in the rain with my 1000 lumen torch, I quickly sweep the immediate area, but don't see anything. Buddy sleeps with earplugs and is a heavy sleeper to boot, so he doesn't even wake. Finally, climb back in my hammock and after some difficulty, fall asleep. Friend always is the first to wake. He comes and shakes my hammock to wake me yelling. Grab my gun, what the fuck are you talking about? Only really heard the word, bear, in my sleep haze. Jump out of the hammock and follow him into the forest, naked still. We get to the area where we had hung our bear bags, and the tree he had hung his from had claw marks all the way up to the branch he had slung it over. The branch had been ripped right off. His food bag was nowhere to be found. Thankful that it was his and not mine because I always overpack on food and he always underpacks. I offered him some of my extra meals. Take mine down and head back to camp, pack up, and hit the trail. Maybe a quarter mile down the trail, we come across these really nice permanent campsites that we could have stayed at. Sitting in the middle of one is what's left of his food bag, trash thrown everywhere. Now, I had always been under the impression that when bears get a hold of food, they stop and eat it there, not carry it away. At least, I figured that was the rationale behind throwing them your food to distract them in a confrontation. So back to being creeped out again. One of the reasons this place is always so spooky is because of the thick canopy, which makes it really dark on the trail, and because there always seems to be intense fog, like previous pic related. This day was no exception. My buddy always leads and I always bring up the rear whenever we go out, whoever we go out with. This day, the fog was so thick that he would disappear every few minutes in front of me. I recorded it on my GoPro, and the footage afterwards was pretty neat. Continue hiking. Most of the morning was uneventful, except for the fog stuff. As we are nearing the summit of the mountain we were climbing, I stopped to take pic related. Meant for my friend to be in it for scale, but he walked around that corner before I could get the picture. Grab my hiking poles off the tree they were leaning on and start around the corner after him. As soon as I do, I see him standing there stock still with his face very intent back the way we had come. Bear. I grab my air horn and throw it to him and unholster my gun while spinning around and looking wildly everywhere. Where? Then I see it. The damn thing comes flying down the tree I had literally just had my hiking poles leaning against. Now, I've been hiking my entire life and seen dozens of bears all over Canada and the US, especially black bears, but I had never seen one in a tree before. Excuse me, one this big in a tree before. The thing was easily chest high and probably 250 to 300 pounds. But the damn thing came flying down that tree like a fireman's pole. Wait for the bear to follow us around the corner while friend is using the air horn. Hear the bear running back down the mountainside. Once we judge it's clear we keep moving on. Right after this, the temperature plummets and it starts raining. The fog still doesn't let up at all. Start getting lost because the trail is so scarcely used and overgrown. Not precisely overgrown, but everything looks the same. The ground looks the same in every direction because the canopy killed off all the underbrush. Maybe poorly defined is what I'm looking for. I take over as the lead since I have more experience tracking than he does. Make our way to the backside of the mountain. At one point, he nearly steps on a quail and scared the shit out of both of us. Come across pic related meadow. Great photo op. We take lots of pictures before moving on. Now the rain really starts up. Finally put on my rain jacket and when I go to put my pack back on, notice a shoe that's definitely not mine on the ground. Dude, is that your shoe? Even before his response, I knew what it would be. We're both very experienced backpackers, and neither of us would bring street shoes like that on the trail. Go back to half alert mode, scan the trees while we continue to hike. A couple miles later, we come across an abandoned tent. Literally looks like someone had smashed the fuck out of it and left. All the poles were busted in half, it was flattened, and had muddy shoe prints all over the outside of it. We look at each other and agree to start hiking faster. We already have a pretty blistering pace. We average 2.5 to 3 miles per hour in the Appalachians. Over the course of the next probably 5 miles, we see an abandoned tarp, probably the biggest tarp I'd ever seen, really, several more abandoned shoes, abandoned clothes, and finally an abandoned backpack. We're both freaked out after the third shoe we found. Like I said, this trail barely gets any use during the summer, let alone the end of winter, and after 2 days, we still haven't seen a soul. Anyways, we hike another 7 miles after the last discarded shirt we see before we judge it safe to camp. We had hiked around 20 miles in the rain that day and were exhausted physically, and a bit mentally from whatever the fuck had happened in the woods earlier. We set up camp next to this beautiful waterfall. There were 3 campsites that other campers had left behind, so we took the one with the best view. The rain finally stopped once we had finished setting up our hammocks. Decide to build a fire tonight to dry out. Go to the furthest campsite, didn't want to cook dinner near our site after what had happened the night before, and build a fire. Collect a shitload of firewood because I'd like to stay up late tonight. We go through all the food I have left except a couple of Clif bars for breakfast and some ramen for lunch tomorrow. Sitting back enjoying the warmth and drying out when I start seeing eyes watching us from the woods. Dude, what the fuck is that? They disappear for a bit. They come back. Next thing we know, this goddamn deer comes into our camp and just starts walking around us, not going away. At this point, I've gone full paranoid. Dude, what if it's distracting us while something fucks with our shit back at camp? Obviously, this is a retarded idea. But just in case, head back to our campsite and verify everything is still good. When I come back, the deer still hasn't left. The goddamn thing just kept circling our fire until we doused it around midnight. We hung up my food bag and headed to bed. I didn't really sleep that night because I was so paranoid. The next day was uneventful hiking out. I gotta say, the road shit was a lot less creepy in the daylight than it was in the dark. Sorry if you were expecting some creepypasta because it was so long, but it was 100% true. All the creepy shit that kept happening just added up by the end. I think all the abandoned stuff made me so paranoid because I used to do shit like that when I was younger. Go out to campsites and do shit just to scare the fuck out of campers, or dress up in costumes and scare them, for the lulz of course. But it's precisely why I never go to West Virginia unarmed. That said, I would highly recommend Cranberry Wilderness for anyone who lives on the East Coast. Plan a route on the south side, it's my favorite.
Dude, the fact that this isn't a creepypasta makes it about 10 times more spooky because there's no suspension of disbelief required. I'm gonna do some googling on deer behavior to see what the heck possessed it to act the way it did.
The only thing I could think of was that it had gotten used to people feeding it, but there was no one that lived within probably 15 miles of there, not to mention no one else on the trail the entire trip.
Did it seem interested in you or your camp, or was it just kinda wandering around?
It would walk up to us and stare and then wander around. It would shy away whenever one of us would try to touch it though.